Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges-Watson. Coming up on today's programme, we examine President Trump's address to the UN General Assembly in which he called Russia a paper tiger and said Western countries are going to hell. He also singled out the Mayor of London for criticism in that address. We'll be asking why. Hello and welcome. The US President Donald Trump has expressed support for Ukraine's military efforts. Taking to social media, he suggested that Ukraine could potentially regain all the territory it's lost to Russia with the backing of NATO and European allies. Well, as for Russia, President Trump later dismissed the country as a paper tiger. Well, his comments were made during a bilateral meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Let's take a listen.
It's been a terrible war, should have ended, and Russia should have stopped it. But they've been 3.5 years and they've gotten not so far. So we'll see what happens. But the other side can fight too, and they've proven that. Maybe it could be that Russia's a paper tiger. I don't know what they are, but 3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Sir Jeremy Greenstock, who was the UK ambassador to the United Nations from 1998 to 2003. Sir Jeremy, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Good afternoon.
It's been pointed out that President Trump's address at the UN 6 years ago was met with some sniggering, some sort of chortling, and some sort of general air of amusement, and that this time the audience listened very carefully. I don't know if you agree with that, whether that was your observations, and if so, why do you think that is?
I think there was a difference this time round, yes. I think that is largely because since he arrived in the White House in January of this year, he's been doing things. He has had an impact on world trade, on certain theatres of conflict, although not with terrific results yet, on his relationships with allies. We know him a bit better after nearly 5 years in the White House. But the American president carries a lot of power, and he's been amassing perhaps more of that power over the last few months. So people have to pay attention, whether they like what he's saying or not. And they have to show a degree of courtesy because he tends to punish people who don't. So yes, people were sitting up and listening, but perhaps they weren't revealing what they were thinking in their own minds.
I mean, you say limited success in his efforts to broker the conclusion to various conflicts around the world, but by his own account, he has personally solved 7 major world conflicts since taking office. What's wrong with that?
I think he genuinely has a good approach to peace. He doesn't want American forces involved overseas. He doesn't want to be taking over countries and changing them. That's what he says anyway. And I think he does want to end the wars in Ukraine and in Israel-Palestine. And I think that's laudable. I don't believe that the results he's claimed will be regarded by historians as fully fitting the facts so far. But the important thing is that he's interested in promoting peace. And let's hope that he continues with that and has more visible success in the months to come.
Now, I saw you on an appearance on another media outlet in the last 24 hours in which you said, sort of words to the effect, you think President Trump got his audience wrong, that he somehow misread the room. And I just wanted to ask you what you meant by that.
Well, I think that much of the world represented in the General Assembly has expectations of the United States in reaching out to poorer countries, in promoting development assistance at a high volume, and being very helpful in Africa and other poorer parts of the world. And the removal of American development assistance and the removal of USAID, the organization that distributes that in Washington, has been noted with some alarm. I think that he, in some of what he said, sounded a bit as though he was talking to an American political audience, lauding his own political approach in the White House, denigrating that of his successor. That doesn't really concern the United Nations, a speaker's domestic situation. That's not normally done in the UN General Assembly in September. So I think he misinterpreted to some extent the nature of the occasion and the nature of his audience. He was very scathing about the scientific approach to climate change, which is of huge concern to most members of the General Assembly, and they would have had different views on that. But they listened politely, and they took the man at face value in that meeting. So there was a bit to say on both sides of this argument, I think.
I mean, he was quite scathing of quite a lot of countries and institutions, notably the institution that was hosting him, the UN. He singled out the fact that the escalator to get him, into the building wasn't working. The teleprompter he was supposed to be using wasn't working, and he seemed to suggest that was a bit of a metaphor for the UN in general terms, suggesting that perhaps the whole institution is broken. I mean, do you think he's got a point that perhaps the UN does need a reboot?
I think he was opportunistic in using those two instances as criticism. It was, after all, the White House that was running his teleprompter, his own team, not the UN. And he managed the escalator very well, so did the First Lady. No, I think he's misreading exactly what the UN is there to do. In its politics, and he is very concerned with politics and geopolitics at the moment, the UN is its member states. It's what nation states do in the forum of the UN, collectively and cooperatively, to address conflict, to deal with the sins and deficiencies around the world that the UN has to deal with. The UN Secretariat and the agencies are something quite different. And if the US is not funding those agencies as much as it's done in the past, or withdrawing funding now from some of those agencies, it's not their fault that they're less able to do good work. But I think he was talking more about the politics, and the UN from its inception has always been a forum for member states to do what they can do collectively to address the ills of the world. And I think his criticism was to that extent misplaced, because if we didn't have the UN as a forum, we would be shooting each other much more quickly. At least we're talking still, and he's talking at the UN. So he came, didn't he? And he spoke to the assembled company. So it's a mixed picture, and he is critical, and many other people are critical, and institutions, particularly international institutions around the world, probably do fade in their impact if they don't reform. But you mentioned rebooting. It's extraordinarily difficult to get formal reform at the UN. There are too many people who oppose it. So let him make some suggestions, let him seek reform and support it, and we'll see where we can get to.
I just want to ask you about the decision by a number of America's allies, including the United Kingdom, to support the notion of recognizing a Palestinian state. That's all happened in the last week or so. And you were one of 30 diplomats who wrote an open letter calling on the British Prime Minister to do this back in July, I believe. So I'm assuming you're pleased that the British government did that.
Yes, I think that they did the right thing. I think that the Palestinian people deserve that kind of political, if rhetorical, support. It's not going to change the situation on the ground. But in being asked about recognition, I regard this act of recognition as meaning two important things. One, that the Palestinian people have inalienable rights to a political future, to self-determination under the UN Charter, and that should be supported. And secondly, it's saying to Israel, in the way that you have pursued your campaign against Hamas, you have brought the whole Palestinian people in both Gaza and the West Bank, and indeed amongst the diaspora, into a much more degraded position. And you are threatening to take over those two territories, the occupied territories. That is something the United Kingdom and its friends in doing this will not support, do not support, because the only alternative to a two-state solution is Israeli takeover of those territories, and we do not regard that as either legal or acceptable in international diplomacy. That is a strong statement. And I interpret it in that way because that statement needs to be made in our search for peace and security for both peoples, Israelis and Palestinians, in due course living together in a reconciled two-state solution. And that's what I've always been looking for.
So when you hear President Trump saying things like he said, that recognition of the Palestinian state was simply a reward for Hamas, how do you respond to such a charge?
Well, I don't think it will be a reward for Hamas for long. Yes, Hamas gave a very pleased reaction to those recognition statements, and I can see why. But we are doing it for the Palestinian people, and I don't think that the Hamas leadership have ably served the whole Palestinian people, who are immensely suffering at this moment. Hamas will not be allowed by those states that made those acts of recognition to be part of any future Palestinian state government. They will have to lay down both their political and their military weapons. It's for the Palestinian people we're doing this, not for Hamas. So to bat this off as some reward for Hamas is not seeing the whole picture, and I would say not seeing the more important part of that picture.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us and sharing those thoughts with us. Sir Jeremy Greenstock, former UK ambassador to the UN. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Sergei Markov, who is a former spokesperson for President Putin, who joins me now from Moscow. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Always a pleasure to see you, Mr. Markov. Just listening to what President Trump said at the UN General Assembly, I mean, I could detect a real change in tone towards Russia. And we heard during his visit to the UN headquarters, President Trump calling Russia a paper tiger and saying it's not a real military power. He also said Ukraine could be in a position to win back all of its territory. How is all of that viewed by Moscow, do you think?
In Moscow, first of all, we have been shocked by such dramatic change of the Donald Trump position. But then we understand that now it's more or less consensus in Moscow that a change of rhetoric, but not change of the real policy. This change of the rhetoric happened after meeting with Vladimir Zelenskyy of Donald Trump. And Vladimir Zelenskyy told to Trump that, oh, look, Ukrainian army now going forward, Ukrainian army is quite good, and oh, Russia has a lot of problem in the economy and in Gaza station, which are talked by Ukrainian drones. And after this, Zelenskyy understood very well there are no chance to get peace deal in Ukraine by such formula which have been suggested by Donald Trump himself. Exchange of the territories to the peace. Ukraine give to Russia rest of the Donbass region, and Russia give to Ukraine the peace deal. Donald Trump understands that this formula doesn't work anymore, that Zelenskyy disagree with this, and this Nobel Peace Prize, it's impossible for Donald Trump to get. That's why Donald Trump, I think, saying with Vladimir Zelenskyy, are you sure that Ukrainian army is so strong? Go ahead. Try to crash Russian army who crashed Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler. And probably you, Vladimir Zelenskyy, will be more strong than Adolf Hitler and Napoleon Bonaparte. And it was more or less joking from the Donald Trump point of view, we think. And in fact, the most important, United States Army will be not directly involved in such war, and policy of Donald Trump toward Ukraine will not change. United States will not give armament to the Ukrainian army. If Europeans want to buy, okay, let them to buy. But United States will be not directly involved in the Ukrainian war anymore. This is not Trump war, this is Biden war. And this is continual, policy will be continual.
Okay, you make a similar point to the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, who said what you said at the beginning, which is that President Trump has changed his tone because of a conversation with President Vladimir Zelenskyy. But aren't you saying, by saying that President Trump doesn't make his own decisions and he simply follows what the Ukrainian president says? I mean, that's a bit basic, isn't it?
Yeah, he changed rhetoric because he wants to distance himself. Donald Trump many times told that because he has very friendly relations with Vladimir Putin, he was thinking that it's a good possibility to make a peace deal. Because, as I understand, Donald Trump believes that Vladimir Putin is ready to compromise. But nevertheless, Donald Trump or Western countries generally, they demand too big compromise from Russia. From our point of view, we already made all this compromise. If Russian army will not take Odessa, Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk, Nikolaev, Zaporozhye, Chernihiv, and Kiev back to Russia, and I should remember you that Kiev was 3 centuries the capital of Russia, it's already a huge compromise. But to have compromise, not stopping political repression against Russian language, political repression against the Orthodox Church, political repression of all Russian culture and identity, such compromise impossible. And now when Trump understands this, he decided to distance himself even more from Ukrainian war. And this is good news for Russia.
It didn't sound like he was distancing himself yesterday. I mean, he's also been trying hard to broker peace between the two sides. But I mean, he's coming to the conclusion, perhaps, that President Putin doesn't seem to want peace. He wants Ukraine, all of it. What do you say to that?
I think, as I understand, the Donald Trump remark in social network is some kind of continuation of the meeting. As I know, Vladimir Zelenskyy told to Donald Trump that Ukrainian army took 160 square kilometers during last 2 weeks, and Ukrainian army is very successful. And also Ukraine very effectively attacked the Russian economy, and Russians will be in big trouble. I think Donald Trump doesn't believe in this. But Donald Trump's remark was, so if you, Vladimir Zelenskyy, really believe this, go ahead. Try to crash great Russian army. If you will be successful to doing this with support of Europeans, okay, we will accept this. But I think Donald Trump himself, meaning that it's more look like that Russia will crash Ukrainian army. And after a few months, Ukrainian leaders will be more ready for real negotiation.
I mean, I think President Trump was asked about the incursions that Russian aircraft have been making into the airspace of NATO states like Poland, Estonia, and Romania. And when asked about that, he was asked, should countries shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace? And President Trump said, yes, I do. They should do that. I mean, how would you see Russia reacting in a situation like that, where one of their aircraft is shot down in the airspace of one of these NATO member states?
If Russian aviation jet will be shut down by NATO countries, it will be action of war, and Russia will react. Maybe not general, more maybe not right now by nuclear weaponry, but nevertheless, Russian will react by military weapons. I think this is very dangerous development. We see some crazy politicians from the Western countries, specifically from Baltic countries, and who is making provocation. And they provoke some kind of clash. Their goal is to stop a Russian so-called shadow oil tanker fleet, which mostly use Baltic Sea aquatorry. And they want to blame some special military condition on Baltic Sea and to organize pirate attacks against Russian shadow oil tanker fleet in Baltic Sea. That's why they believe that Russia will have very big problems in the economy. Of course, it's absolutely not realistic. Russia, very big country. Russia has very good relations with great economies such as China, India, and Russia will never step down under the pressure of pirate attack, which now planned by Baltic provocative politicians. This is very dangerous. We think that Donald Trump disinformed by Western politicians.
Well, is he disinformed, Mr. Markov? Because, I mean, do you dispute the fact that Russian aircraft have made incursions into the airspace of these NATO countries? And if so, why is it doing it? That's not conducive to peace, is it?
Russian jets didn't violate this airspace of the Estonia and NATO countries. I will say Estonia unilaterally changed its border. Russia never recognized such changing of this border or some not inhabitant around some not inhabitant island in the Baltic Sea. And Russian aviation and ships continue to go as they used to do during previous years. And this decision have been made by Estonian government as provocation. Also, look at the drones on the Poland territory. All Western politicians blame that this is Russia, that Russian army sends their drone to the Polish territory, voluntary or involuntary. We believe that it's not so. This is absolutely sure was Russian-produced drones. But there are no any evidence that they have been started from the Russian territory. And I personally believe that Vladimir Zelenskyy was making such provocation because he had all the hundred of the Russian drones, which previous time was taken from the Ukrainian territory, and then he organized this some kind of quasi-Russian attack against Poland territory. So this is mostly provocation of Vladimir Zelenskyy and Party War of Europe, who want to provoke some clashes connected with Russian aviation space. First of all, their main goal is to make pressure on Donald Trump, and they want Donald Trump to make decision to send anti-rocket missile system to the Poland, to the Baltic countries, and to close the sky, first of all, on the Poland, and second, on the Ukrainian territory.
Okay, Mr. Markov, we've got 20 seconds left. I just want to ask you very quickly, when President Trump says he feels very let down by President Putin, in 20 seconds, how do you think Mr. Putin feels about being described in that way, letting him down?
No, I think Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump has very friendly relationship because of many, many reasons. They have similar general values, and also Vladimir Putin helped, I think, to Donald Trump in some of the issues, and Donald Trump very much respect Vladimir Putin. There could be some disagreement, but generally it will be no big clashes, and it will be no better relationship between Putin and Trump.
Okay, thank you so much for your short answer. We're going to have to leave it there. Sergei Markov, thank you very much indeed. Well, Well, Russia wasn't the only target of President Trump's words. The US president also took aim at the London Mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan, during his UN address, calling him, quote, a terrible mayor. Let's take a listen.
And I have to say, I look at London where you have a terrible mayor, terrible, terrible mayor. And it's been so changed, so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law. But you're in a different country. You can't do that. Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained.
The US president speaking there, while the London Mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan, has hit back, calling President Trump a sexist, a misogynist and an Islamophobe.
I think President Trump has shown he is racist, he is sexist, he is misogynistic, and he's Islamophobic. What it is about this Muslim mayor who leads a liberal, multicultural, progressive, successful city that means I appear to be living rent-free inside Donald Trump's head.
The Mayor of London speaking there. Well, to discuss all of this, I'm joined by Jan Halper-Hayes, who's a former member of President Trump's transition team, now based in London. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us, Jan. We're also joined by the broadcaster and political commentator Matthew Stadlen, who also joins us from London. So thank you both very much indeed. Jan, let me start with you. Europe, China, India and Russia were all singled out for criticism by President Trump in that address to the UN General Assembly. So too was the Mayor of London. How did he make his way into the president's speech?
Well, if you had followed Twitter, now X, you would know that they have been having a running social media battle for all these years. That wasn't anything new. They bait each other. It puts them in the news. Donald Trump is not bothered by negative press because you're still talking about him.
OK, I mean, we're all aware that he doesn't like the London mayor. But, Matt, I mean, isn't it slightly surprising that the Mayor of London should be on the mind of the US president to the extent that he gets a special mention at the UN General Assembly? It's all a bit unprecedented, isn't it?
Sadly, it's not surprising, but it is shocking. This was an important set-piece speech by President Donald Trump, a speech in which he could have called for all sorts of serious improvements to the world. But instead, as you say, he allowed himself to deviate towards a petty battle with the Mayor of London. I'm a Londoner born and bred. I've lived here almost all my life, been abroad very briefly during that period. I love my city. It's a great city, I would argue. It's got a very strong case for being the greatest city on the planet. Yes, of course, like any city, we have some problems. But the fact, as you say, that the President of the United States makes time in such an important speech to single out the Mayor of London, and even though he's an important figure, the President is obviously punching down here, I think is really, really dispiriting. And I side unequivocally in this spat with my own Mayor of London, for whom I have voted 3 times. And I wouldn't go as far as to use a word like racist towards the president. What I would say is that there have been things he's said over the many years of him being in public life and in public office, indeed that he is the most powerful human being on the planet, that have been dog whistle calls to prejudice. And I'm afraid I think this is just another example to lambast the Mayor of London and immediately segue into saying they want to bring in Sharia law is exactly the sort of remark you would expect of someone who is Islamophobic. And the thing with what Donald Trump has said here and the playbook of people on his side of the political aisle, not everyone by any means, is deniability. And there's just enough wriggle room in that statement for him to deny being Islamophobic. But if you want to know what my impression of those remarks is very, very straightforwardly Islamophobic.
Okay, Jan, I can see you shaking your head there. What have you got to say to Matt's comments then?
Well, I always find we distinguish between liberals in the US and leftists, and this kind of leftist thinking that does not take historical things, does not understand the game that is going on between these politicians. But here's what these leftists do. Instead of making really serious comments, anything that has any substance, they go to name calling. And so then their followers latch onto that. And here we are on a major news show, and we are talking about petty things instead of understanding what's really going on and understanding that just name calling is not a good retort from Sadiq Khan.
So what is really going on then?
Well, I've been explaining the dynamics of it. And when you have the way the leftists think, oh, well, he criticized a Muslim man, so he must be Islamophobic. That is irrational logic. If you just buy into... I didn't interrupt you, sir, and I didn't comment on yours, so please. I would.
Sorry, you are right now commenting on me, suggesting I am a name caller at the same time as calling me a leftist. And you're saying that I am being petty when it is the President of the United States, the most powerful human being on the planet, who is being petty, and not just petty, but deeply bigoted, in my view, towards a Muslim mayor of my city. So I would suggest that you are, to use that oft-used word these days, gaslighting me and gaslighting every member of the audience to this news show.
Okay, Jan,
we must let you respond. Point and accusing me of, I appreciate you validating some of my criticism because you've gone to name calling of me. And when I made the comment, I didn't interrupt while you were going on. And so I asked you to please not interrupt me. And I often tell people, what is the difference between a shotgun and a leftist? A shotgun only has one trigger. And you told me many of my words triggered you. And that is the point that I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Sorry, I haven't been triggered by you. I've got far thicker skin than you seem to give me credit for. What is the issue here is the behavior and conduct and the language being used by the President of the United States at an important set-piece event, a set-piece speech at none other than the United Nations, and his petty and inflammatory criticism of a Muslim mayor of my city. As I said, I was born and brought up here. I've lived here almost all my adult life. And the idea that we are, or anyone here, is moving towards or going for Sharia law, there is no evidence for that. I'm sure there will be some Muslim members of my city, fellow citizens, who might in an ideal world want Sharia law, and I would reject that. But the idea that anyone in power in London, let alone the Mayor of London, who, by the way, marches in favour of and in support of gay and other minority rights, the idea that he is somehow championing Sharia law is completely dishonest, without any basis in fact. And all you seem to be able to do is accuse me of calling you names, which I haven't done, while call me names such as leftist, when you've never met me before, and I suspect know very little about me in return. It's really poor argument.
The leftists. I said the leftists. But the thing is that, all right, think back over time since Donald Trump has been a main figure. How many leaders has he outwardly criticized when he has had the cameras on him? And what ultimately ends up happening with their relationship? Either they continue as Sadiq Khan and Trump are, more often than not, they come together. Trump has a strategic strategy. He doesn't do anything off the cuff. So he thought loud and clear, long and hard, and maybe only a couple of minutes, that he was going to make a reference to the mayor of London.
Okay, I want to ask you a quick question, though.
Can I just quickly respond?
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
To suggest that Donald Trump does nothing, your words, off the cuff, is patently deniable by what happened during this very speech, in which the teleprompter broke down and Donald Trump embraced speaking off the cuff. He is known, as far as I'm concerned, for speaking off the cuff and going off script. To suggest otherwise is patently absurd.
Okay, let me just ask a quick question. I mean, clearly, Jan, London's a very international city, and evidence of that is the fact that you live there, you spend a lot of your time there. And one of the points that the Mayor of London made, Sir Sadiq Khan, he said that record numbers of Americans are actually coming to live in London. I mean, that suggests that, you know, not everyone dislikes the direction London is going in. I mean, what's wrong with the direction London's going in? And I'd love to get your point of view as an American who lives there.
Okay, I would not phrase it as what's going wrong with London. What are some of the problems that the media focuses on and gives people an impression that it could be worse than it is? The one thing has been the knives. Crime has gone up. Crime is a big issue around the globe for politicians to deal with. But I've been here 24 years. My son died here, sadly, and people thought I would leave. I just flew in, and as my ride came home, I thought about how much I love London. Every city has its problems, but even when the media makes a bigger deal about it, it gives people the wrong impression. Now, Americans leaving and wanting to come here, well, I wanted for a long time. I even married a Brit, but most people leave their heart in San Francisco. I left my ex there and took my son and my heart and came to London. I see all the beauty, and I know there are problems, but we can't. And look, there are cities in the U.S., Dearborn, Michigan is under Sharia law. I think there might have been part of the reason that he brought it up was that he will eventually do a comparison between the two cities in Michigan that are run by Sharia law. Okay. That doesn't make you Islamophobic.
So, jump in. Let me respond, if I may. First of all, my sincerest condolences about the death of your son. Secondly, thank you for saying positive things about your city as well as my city, because, as you say, you've been here for over 2 decades, which makes it your city as well. And you're as perfectly able to comment on it and as free as I am to comment on it. And I'm all ears as to your views on it. But I disagree very strongly with some of what you've said. The reason we are talking about London in a negative light, or rather I am having to defend it, and to some extent you have defended it, is precisely because of the targeting of London by Donald Trump and others who might be affiliated to his movement. And I'm very sorry to say that many of the attacks on London seem to be motivated by, inspired by Islamophobia, by bigotry more generally, by xenophobia. And those attacks come from within the United Kingdom and from without. Okay. And if Donald Trump is not going to stand, even Donald Trump is not going to stand at the United Nations in front of the eyes of the world and say he doesn't like Muslims. Of course he's not. But what he has done in those remarks about Sadiq Khan, whether they were off the cuff, those particular remarks or not, is link far too closely a Muslim mayor with a baseless assertion that they are going for Sharia law. And that it offers deniability to the president, which allows you to defend him in a way you couldn't defend him if he simply came out and said he doesn't like Muslims. Now, he may well have some Muslim friends, but if you target a Muslim mayor and effectively tarnish him with the idea that he's trying to insert Sharia law into the United Kingdom, where it has no basis in our legal system and will have no basis in our legal system. I'm very clear that I don't want it to have any basis in our legal system. If you defend the president's remarks, then I'm afraid you are part of that particular problem.
Matt, I've got a question for you, just briefly, picking up on what you're saying.
I just want to respond with one thing.
Okay.
I didn't defend, I explained. And that is an important distinction. I explained, because I want people to understand. That is why I'm not willing to critique Sadiq Khan. He doesn't deserve that, but I can explain the historical perspective of the battle for almost a decade that has been going on between the two.
Okay, Matt, I want to pick up on what Jan was saying about knives and the implication being that crime is on the rise in London. That's something we see quite a lot of outside the UK, a lot of clips, a lot of videos suggesting there's a big problem. And I'm told you too have fallen victim to street crime in the UK. Do correct me if I've been ill-informed. Do you blame the mayor for that? Do you agree with the assertion that he is a terrible mayor, as the US president has said, presumably drawing on this crime issue on the streets of London?
So just very, very quickly.
I wouldn't use the word terrible for him.
No, that's what Donald Trump said. President Trump said terrible. That's a question for Matt.
He did, but okay.
Just very quickly, I should emphasize, because I haven't so far, and that's my mistake, that Sadiq Khan has no role in immigration. He has no powers over immigration to this country as Mayor of London. And we should be absolutely crystal clear about that. Decisions about immigration are made over his head. On the issue of crime, as I understand it, homicides in London are at a 10-year low. Now, of course, one homicide is too many in whichever or whatever city around the world. And I want the police to do everything they can within the law to make sure that we have no homicides. As far as crime more widely is concerned, I'll tell you what I've noticed, and I've noticed it partly because, as you say, I've been a victim of it. I have noticed in very recent times, or relatively recent times, an uptick in the theft of mobile phones. And I had my mobile phone snatched from behind me by a man on I think an electric bike, a speed bike. I had no chance to defend myself. I had my dogs in my left hand, the leads of my dogs in the left hand, and I was typing a text message to my mother in the right hand. I wasn't paying attention, which I regret. And this man came up from behind me and snatched my mobile phone and sped off far more quickly on his bike than I was able to catch up with him. And that was a major inconvenience. And when you've been the victim of crime, it obviously gives you a certain perspective. And I shared that publicly. And in fact, Elon Musk shared a crying with laughter emoji in response to a post on his platform that mocked effectively, in my view, my experience, because it shared an earlier post in which I'd said I had never been a victim of mugging and didn't intend to be, I think. This is technically a mugging, but I had no chance to defend myself. But the point is, if I have friends coming to London, I will now advise them not to talk as on their mobile phones in the street, which anyway is not a particularly good idea because it risks you bumping into people. So I have noticed that. And I'm also aware, certainly, of a feeling of an uptick in shoplifting. Now, these are issues that as a Londoner, of course, I care about and I want something to be done about. And there's an extent to which Sadiq Khan is responsible for that because he has oversight, as I understand it, of the Metropolitan Police. But how the police function in our city and indeed other cities around the country is also a consequence to some extent of how much money is available to them, being made available to them by central government. So it is by no means Sadiq Khan's only responsibility.
Okay, Jan, let me ask you, I mean, do you feel unsafe walking down the street in London?
No, I don't. And I live in a mix between Afro-Caribbean. I mean, I moved from Kensington to south of London. Afro-Caribbean, somewhat Muslim, a few of the African nations based on the great restaurants. And I walk my dog. I'll walk my dog at 11 at night, midnight. No, I don't. But I know that I live in a safe neighborhood. I'm not going to go at that hour to a neighborhood that I know is unsafe. just like you don't go to the south side of Chicago because that's where all the killings and shootings happen.
Right. So, what do you think of Sadiq Khan's track record as mayor of London? As a woman who lives there, who's of American origin, I mean, what's your impression, Jan?
My impression is the same impression that I have of a lot of politicians that are in roles of leadership, is they can't control everything. They get blamed for the problems. It is the policies that can make their job harder. And you have to look at those things. I don't like to use judgmental words in that way, especially with politics, because we need to understand exactly what is really going on and what the complexities are. We're so quick to judge and label and say this is horrible. He's got problems. Have things improved? Are there things we object to? Like all these cameras that went up, and if you drive around London, you get charged. No, we don't like those policies. And I think if we looked at the policies more, we would understand where he has support and where he doesn't have support. But more importantly, is that would be the voice of the voters.
OK, so just to sum up, Jan, before we go to Matt, to give him a chance to have his closing remarks, because you did start. It sounds to me like, you know, your message to the rest of the world and to your president is that the mayor of London isn't so very bad, that he warrants being called out at the UN General Assembly. I mean, does that roughly sum up?
The difference is that you are judging. You have made a judgment.
I'm not judging anyone.
Using the UN, the people who have made the judgment that because he said that at the UN Assembly, he therefore is horrible. Excuse me. No, because we're picking on the wrong thing. We're picking on the fact that he spoke out at a place where he maybe shouldn't have. Are you aware that he told King Charles Sadiq Khan could not come to the dinner for him? Did it dawn on people that Sadiq Khan is ticked off about that?
I'm aware of that.
They're baiting each other. That's what I just want people to look at what is presented to us and make their own decisions, but to not take things based out of context in the moment.
All right, Matt, let me give you the closing comments since you didn't open. Just to sort of wrap up this conversation, any final observations? And also, I'd like to ask you, I mean, even the Reform leader, Nigel Farage, you wouldn't expect to come springing to the defence of Mayor Sadiq Khan, seemed a little bit puzzled by these comments in New York. What are your sort of overall sort of closing comments here with regards to what's been the reaction in the political across the...
First of all, just to give a bit of context on what seemed to be further supportive remarks on behalf of Donald Trump, what actually happened was on the aeroplane, I think, back to America, Trump bragged about having had Sadiq Khan banned from that state visit banquet. So that's also undignified for a president to be boasting about such a thing. And I've seen suggestions since that wasn't actually factually correct. And indeed, Sadiq Khan has said he wouldn't expect to be invited to such a banquet. In summary, what I would say is that can anyone watching really imagine another US president, a former US president, making the sort of personalized remarks that Donald Trump, and this is where I agree here, makes about all sorts of different figures. I agree it's not only Muslim mayors that he has targeted, but when he targets individuals in this way, it's pernicious. I think it's a form of bullying, and it also brings into disrepute the office of the President of the United States. Now, where his remarks about Sadiq Khan become even more sinister, in my view, is where there are undertones or overtones of Islamophobia. And I repeat in my closing remarks that when you single out a London mayor and describe him as terrible, which in my view is unpresidential language for a democratically elected politician in a country with which you are supposed to have a special relationship, when you describe him as terrible and in the next breath say that London has changed, and then go on to say immediately afterwards that they want Sharia law now, but they can't have it because it's not their country. It leaves, whatever your politics, it leaves me with the view that there are not many alternatives or other options other than to think that that is a form of deniable, and yes, it is deniable, Islamophobia by the President of the United States. And as a proud Londoner, I stand up for my mayor, and I don't agree with him on everything. I've already said that policing is something that is not just his responsibility, but the responsibility of others. But nonetheless, I want him scrutinized on it. But I stand up for my mayor, even if I don't agree with him on everything. And I also champion my city. Despite its problems, it is a great city. Culture, sport, freedom, all sorts of amazing things. It's beautiful. Come to London if you have the chance. Maybe don't use your mobile phone out in public, but enjoy our great city and you'd be welcome. So long as you behave and are respectful yourselves, you will be welcome.
Well, dog walking in London has come up in this conversation twice. Both of you seem to walk dogs around the city, and perhaps you'll bump into each other. And can continue the conversation with the dog leads in hand. Thank you very much. You've had the last word, Matt Stadlen. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks as ever, Jan Halper-Hayes. Thanks for joining us once again here on Arabiya English. Now, as a growing list of countries announce their recognition of the Palestinian state, Israel is continuing its deadly campaign in Gaza. Well, Israeli bombardment has killed at least 30 people across the Strip during the course of this morning alone, and that number may already have risen. Well, at sea, Israel is escalating its offensive on the Gaza aid flotilla, which is now in its final stretch towards the besieged territory. The global Samud flotilla says its vessels have come under attack by drones and aircraft. Well, let's get more now. We can cross to the Gaza Strip and we can speak to Michail Fotiadis, who is a project coordinator for Médecins Sans Frontières in northern Gaza. He joins us from just outside Khan Yunis. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Before we talk about what's happening on the ground, I just want to ask you about events thousands of kilometers away in these various capitals around the world that have announced recognition of a Palestinian state. How was that news received in Gaza?
To tell you the truth, people are happy, but in the same time, they have to endure all this situation on the ground. Recognitions are not changing for the moment the dire conditions of life in Gaza.
Okay, so it's not changing the situation on the ground, as you say. Just describe the situation right now across the Strip.
First of all, since the evacuation order given to the population of the Gaza City, many thousands left with whatever means they had. They left because of fear, because there is a constant fear of being hit by a series of weaponry, but and using also the only road available to them, the coastal road, Al Rasid. But many remain behind. Many people cannot leave, the elderly, the wounded, the heavily pregnant, people that they don't have the means. The city of Gaza is being encircled by the IDF meter by meter every day. So there is a possibility that there will be no escape soon.
Right, we're told that some 700,000 people are still inside Gaza City. That's despite warnings from the IDF to leave.
Yes.
We were told there was a state of famine there as well. I mean, presumably no supplies are getting into that city, are they?
The supplies, they cannot enter in the city at the present moment. So people rely to what they have, and that is thinning every day, no? Not only the supplies, but also access to water. It's increasingly difficult to distribute water to the population, and the access also to health structures is very, very difficult. In the last days, we had the destruction of quite a lot of health facilities. The hospitals are struggling with very few supplies, and another problem is the population cannot reach out of fear. No, if you are a target of a drone wherever you go, people cannot move, and we have many casualties. We have many buildings with people trapped inside. There is no fuel to run the hospital as they should. Doctors and the health professionals, they're doing their utmost to help, but still, it's beyond catastrophic, no?
Now, with regards to the situation at the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip, the Al-Shifa hospital, Israel claims that militants opened fire from within the hospital compound, and so that hospital has once again been the scene of violence. Have you heard any more details with regards to the situation at Al-Shifa?
No, about this incident, I just heard about it today. No, we don't know anything because the support we give to Al-Shifa or any other hospital is purely medical. So really, I don't have anything to add to this. But Shifa is 200, 300 over its capacity. So every day is getting more difficult to save people's life.
Right, and that's because presumably there are very many fewer hospitals than there were before this conflict, and people, as you say, are being injured every day in bombardment. What is left of the healthcare system across the Gaza Strip now?
According to the data, 16 to 18 hospitals, they are still functioning out of 36. In the south and the middle area in Khan Yunis or in whatever we can call it safer, because nobody is safe in Gaza Strip, 16 to 18 hospitals, they are partially working. Not all the services are given. In the last couple of days, we saw that the Arabiya pediatric hospital in Gaza City is closed. There were also the evacuation of the Jordan Field Hospital towards Khan Yunis. So, I mean, day by day, hospitals are getting so overcrowded, so beyond capacity, that eventually one day they will crash.
Where you are in Khan Yunis right now, you say it's relatively safer. I mean, what is the security situation like for people living there? Are you seeing daily instances of violence there as well?
Look, as I said, nobody is safe in Gaza. Yes, of course, cannot compare with the present situation in Gaza City. But those people that they decide to leave from the city, there is another problem. They cannot find a place to pitch a tent. Most of the people, it was very difficult for them to leave the Gaza City. Some on wheelchairs, some on foot. So they are coming to a safer zone with no place to sit. It's already overcrowded. There are so many displaced from previous displacement. And services soon will be so overcrowded that we might see also the spread of diseases, lack of water. You know, water is life. So we are struggling, but population will keep on coming.
Give me a couple of adjectives to describe the situation in Gaza right now.
It's very difficult because sometimes words cannot describe. If I say catastrophic today, tomorrow I cannot use the same word. You understand? I mean, it's like deliberate trying to make Palestinian people disappear.
Have you ever seen anything like this in your career?
Look, in my career, I'm 30 years in the field. It's the first time that I'm experiencing something so deep, so heartbreaking, and so dramatic. And I was in Gaza City before. So you understand, it's something for me that goes beyond the, we have to protect, in the name of humanity, the people of Gaza. And also, humanity is not optional. It's not something that we choose. Being part of this collective humanity that we are, what is happening today in Gaza, we should not lose the faith to it.
What's your message to the rest of the world, in particular to world leaders who are trying to broker a conclusion to this war, nearly 2 years into it? What would you like them to be doing?
Act with all their capacity to stop this genocide in Gaza, to make the capacity, to facilitate the entrance in Gaza of life-saving supplies, to stop bombing hospitals and killing innocent civilians and health professionals. Nothing more than this, to do in the name of humanity, to stop this madness.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we wish you all the best with your work. Please do.
Can I add one thing? Another issue that governments and the international community can help is the issue of people that they need urgently to be medically evacuated in order to seek and get the proper care outside of Gaza, or else we are just continue to count people that they are dying every day.
So you're calling on governments to allow for the critically ill and injured to be evacuated from Gaza and given proper hospital treatment elsewhere. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, to accept in their countries as many Palestinians, as many wounded, as many people that they are in dire need of urgent medical help.
Okay, well, we appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed, Michail Fotiadis.
Thank you.
Project Coordinator for Médecins Sans Frontières in Northern Gaza. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. Well, that's all we've got time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. We'll have some more exclusive interviews for you. Until then, bye-bye.